Welcome back, team, and welcome to AWS and Linux Foundation course. Today, the agenda is to go over with the Apache web server application setup, right? So, I think the basics that we have done so far, right, are to understand the Linux operating system and some of the infrastructural related discussions on the AWS side, right? Right. So, as we have discussed that. Once we know the infrastructure details and once we understand the Linux operating system basics, then the next level is to understand the application, right? Really, the application is the one which will be doing our business use case, like what kind of the services that we are expecting it from Linux, right? We need to deploy the specific application. We got a little introduction about the open SSH application, right? And this application is all about providing you the login related services where you can log in into the servers using the SSH application and the corresponding port number binding, how to install, set up application softwares. We have seen that kind of the basic details, right? So today let's continue with the one more application called Apache Web Server, right? So the agenda is, right, understanding Apache Web Server installation and Apache Web Server log management, response codes, and we'll also talk about the performance management of a web server application, right? Well, so let's see what is this Apache Web Server software and how this is helping us. Okay. Here I am introducing you the Apache Web Server application architecture and how exactly this application works, guys. Okay. So the goal here is I need to host a website in the EC2 instance, and I need to serve this web application to the users from the public internet space. You all know, right, how the websites are working in the sense as of today you can go to your favorite browsers can browse a website by giving www dot. So today we are exactly understanding how that websites are set up in the server side and how those are working, right? So let's say you take one EC2 instance in your AWS cloud in the specific regions, and that is deployed in the AWS respective data centers in the selected region, right? So I have a user. This user would like to access a website from his browser. Let's say this user is currently in the public internet and he would like to go to the browser in his laptop and he would like to access a website, right? Now I'm taking this EC2 instance to serve the website that is loading in a user laptop, right? That's what is the setup now, right? So when the user is actually browsing the website from his browser, the request should come to the EC2 instance planning to where I'm deploying my Apache HTTP web server application. Okay. The Apache HTTP web server application will be listening on port number 80 and port number 443. Port number 80 is the default port number, right? Which will be, binded to your Apache HTTP web server application that I'm going to install here. And this is, responsible in giving the web application to the users whoever is actually looking for. 443 is the port number which is listening by the Apache HTTP web server, right? Which is giving you the secured web application. So the only difference between these two, right? The data traffic that is flowing from the client who is accessing my website to the server who is responsible in giving the response back, right? In between, the data will be traveled in a encrypted format if it is 443, right? If it is 80 port number, the data that is flowing between the source and the destination, between the client and the server, will be a plain text format. That's only the difference between these two ports. That's the reason the 443 port number is the secure port, which is giving you the secured web application access to the end users. The port number 80 is not a secured web application, and hence you can see the service here. The 443 is called as a HTTPS, which is a secured HTTP, and 80 is just a HTTP, guys. That's how we will be representing this services as well. Well, today the scope is to go over with the port number 80, which is the default port number for a Apache HTTP web server, and understanding how this is exactly involving in terms of web hosting and giving the web services to the users, right? So whenever the end user is accessing the website by going to their browser, I'm expecting that request should come to my EC2 server. As you know, when a client is trying to consume some services from the server, always the client has to send a request to the specific port number, right? Because each port number is binded to a specific application service, and that port number is intended, right, to serve you that services, right? So when the client is sending the request on port number 80, the first request will come to the security group of your EC2 instance. As we know, right, the security group is the network firewall, which is filtering the incoming and outgoing data, and takes the decision whether the request has to be allowed or not, correct? So which is like a security layer for your EC2 instances, that what we called out, right? So when the port number 80 is in the security group inbound rules to allow, then the client request will be accepted and will be sending to your EC2 server. Now, once the request is came to the EC2 server, right, the service must be installed, configured, running in order to take up the request, right? Here the HTTPD is the service name that must be running, and slash var slash www slash html is the default location where the website related code and the data has to be resided. That means how the website should come to my actual user who is accessing my website, that website design, the data, what content that you would like to show. The content could be a text or a image or a video or whatever, right, based on the use case of your website, right? So all that data is resided in the default location called var www.html. Once the request is came to the EC2 server after passing that through the security group, the HTTPD is a service responsible in listening to the request. The HTTPD service will be going to the default document root folder. In this default document root folder, whatever the code files are there, whatever the data is available, that data will be sending as a response back to the requester. As usual, the response also going through the outbound rules of a security group. Once it is allowed, the same response will be giving it back to the requester or a client, so that whatever the response is received by the web server, EC2 server, that is showing you as a website or a web application, right? You see here, whenever the end user is accessing www.shopper.com, could be any website. Ideally here I'm taking one example at shopper.com, right, and the website will be loaded. That is a typical process is involved in accessing a website, guys. So if a website has to be working, then, right, you need to install the Apache HTTP web server software. Apache HTTP web server is the open source application that you can install and set up. This application is responsible in listening to port number 80 by default and giving the response back to the requester, right, by taking the default code and the data that is available in the default document root folder called var www.html. All what you need to do is install this package, make sure that the HTTPD service is up and running, make sure that the HTML based website code and the data is kept into the default location. That's it. Then the website will start working, right? So I think let's continue doing this implementation, guys, right? So I'm going to my AWS Management Console, this is where my EC2 instance is currently running, right, with the default Amazon Linux AMI with the t2.micro, and I just have logged into my EC2 instance from my putty here, correct? And you all know how to logging into the EC2 instances by now, right? So now let's continue installing the application, guys, right? Before I actually install the application, let me show you a few things. Systemctl httpd, sorry, systemctl status httpd. You see, it is complaining that the httpd is the service that is not currently found at this time. Why it is ending with the D? D refers that this is a daemon, right? So HTTP is the service, and HTTPD is also called as a daemon. Currently, it is not available. Why? As you know, by default, all the applications will not be available in the default Linux operating system, right? The SHS was available by default, well and good, because there is a mandatory need for you to logging into the servers. But any other applications, you need to install it, right? Even I can show you that slash etc slash http, this directory is not found, right? This is the default home directory where the Apache web server software configuration will be located. It's not there. Even I can show you that where www html is also not found. That means anything related to the Apache web server software is not available in my system now. Let me go ahead and install the Apache web server software, guys. As you know, right, yum is the command to install the Apache web server. Yum install. HTTPD is the package name that you need to use here to install the Apache web server. If you have any confusions, or you wanted to know what will be the name of the package that you need to install, you can always refer through their official portal. Let's say Apache web server, right? So you need to navigate to the corresponding the official web page where it is describing about the Apache HTTP web server project, right? And in this website you will be getting the details, how to download, how to install, what is the package name that you need to use to install the Apache web server, how this Apache web server works. You will get all the required details and the documentation in this portal, guys. You can refer through to get more details about the package naming standards. Here, since I know the package name, that's right, I'm just proceeding with this command yum install httpd, and you hit enter. As you know, right, it will by default try to download this httpd package from its Amazon core repositories. Sometimes if it is not found in the core repository, as you know, right, we need to always set up the extras repository to make this installation. But I am sure the HTTPD is such a basic package that must be available in the core repository. You can just go ahead and start installing this package. Once the Apache HTTPD package is installed, now I can show you that slash etc slash httpd, right? This folder is exist. That means slash etc slash httpd is the home directory for the Apache web server application. It has some configuration files in it. In the conf directory you can see a file called httpd.conf, right? So let me show you the full path. Slash etc slash httpd slash conf slash httpd.conf is the configuration file for your Apache web server application. Configuration file in the sense, this is the settings file if you wanted to do any customizations, right, to configure your Apache web server, right? So if you open this configuration file, it has some comment lines to give you more information, and below you can see that the line which is not having a hash, that is not a commented, this line will be processed. You see some settings, guys. So it is saying that what is the default home directory for the Apache web server, which is slash etc slash httpd. which has the details that what is the default port number that it has to listen on. Port number 80 is the default port number. If we do little scroll down, right, we can even see the details, something like document root folder. So by default, the website related code and the data will be found in which location. You see where www.html is the default location where the website related, the default code and the data will be found. This is how you are customizing how your web server should act on, guys, right? We can do any changes based on your requirement, but the default will be good enough, right? You even see that, if you go a little down, I can show you that, the directory index. Again, guys, I'm showing some of the important parameters only in the settings file, not everything, right? So you can see that the directory index, it's talk about index.html is the default file that it has to look for in the var www.html. That is what is the statement. That means when a client is accessing the website, when the request came to your EC2 server, the HTTPD service will first go to default document root folder where www.html. In that, it will look for the file called index.html. If this file is found, then this file will be giving as a response back to the client, and this file, whatever the code that is available in this file, that code will be showing you as a website format by the browser. That is how it is working, right? Like that, some settings are there here, so I don't need to do any changes to the settings at this time. Let it be all default, right? It has even the details including where the logs has to be generated. Remember, guys, ideally if you are setting up any application, the basic steps are how to download a application package, how to install the application, which service will be created, what is the home directory of the application, and what is the customization configuration file, and where the logs will be generated. Correct. So I'm just trying to go through the same thing, and which is the port number that the application is listening on. Correct. So I'm just showing you all those settings in this configuration file, guys. Let it be the other properties, whatever you see here, we don't need to worry, right? This is the one more log file. Let me save this, right? Now if you go to var www.html, you see this folder was not there before, right? Once you install the Apache HTTPD package, then you see all these folders were created in your system automatically. Now currently this var www.html is the empty folder. This is where you need to copy your website code and the data. Good. Now systemctl status httpd. You see, guys, sometime back the command was reporting that httpd service was not found, but now you see that service is there. You see where the service is created. httpd.service is the file that is now created in the systemd location, because right, this is the systemd service, right? And currently it is a inactive mode. That means everything is installed, but the service is not started to listen on port number 80. Are we good with this? Now in order to make use of this application, you need to start a services, right? Systemctl start httpd, right? I'm just starting the services. As you know, once you start the service, the service will start reading the configuration file as per the configuration file settings. It will start listening to the dedicated port number and will start responding to the clients. Correct? Let me do that. Once you start the service, let me verify the service again. Now you see that Apache Webserver software or application, right, is currently running and it is loaded 4 seconds ago. All good. Now I can show you that netstat hyphen tupln is the command to show you that the port number 80 is currently listen state. You see this entry, guys? The port number 80 currently listening by HTTPD. HTTPD is a service which is also a process, right? And you can see the process ID here, which process ID generated to make this service up and running. We can see the same details in the ps-ef command as well. If you look into the ps-ef, right, you should be able to see the HTTPD. You see guys, HTTPD, right? This service is started 1553 is the the process ID of this service. The HTTPD is also created few more sub processes as well, just to handle the multiple user requests. So let it be. So you need to be worry about only the parent one. You see 1553 is the primary process ID of your web server, and 1553 is acting as a parent to start few more sub processes. That is a internal activity for you. You don't need to worry about that, right? I'm just confirming you guys that how and what's happening when you install a package and start a services. All good. Now let me go back here. I have taken a EC2 instance. I have installed the Apache Webserver packages, and the service is currently up and running. This is listening on port number 80, and we know that where www.html is the default location where the code should be deployed. And what is the default file that's supposed to be in the where www.html, guys? As per the configuration, right? In the var www.html, the default file should be index.html, right? So what I do, let me go and create a index.html file in this location. Ideally, the developers are required to write a code, but here just to test how the web server works, let me create a simple file, and in the simple file, let me put a simple line of text, right? This is my first website. I'm just putting some one simple line, guys, because HTML is the long ways where you can write a simple line as well. That will be treated as a plain text that has to be shown in your front-end website, not a problem, right? You see, I just have created a index.html file. Now, can I use this statement? Whenever the user is trying to access a website, when the request come to the EC2 server, right, the HTTPD service will go to where www.html. In that location, it will pick up the index.html file. This file will be sending as a response back to the user. The browser will understand what is in the index.html. That code will be showing you as a beautiful UI format. Make sense, guys? Now, let me try to access the website, right? Currently, the EC2 instance that I created in the AWS, this instance is having this IP address. You all know, right? If the client has to access my server, the request should come to this IP address only, right? This is the unique identification number of your EC2 server, right? What I do is, let me take this IP, right? Now, before me accessing the website, can I use this statement, right? Ideally, the server side, some services will be running. That services are actually offering the services, the business services on a specific port number. The client is the one who is actually sending a request and utilizing those services, right? That is a typical process for any application. Even when I go back into the time SSD service is running on the server side. To use the SSH services, you are actually sending the request using the client. What was the client that I was using previously to logging into the server to use the SSD services, guys? Putty, right? So Putty is acting as a client there. Same way here, in order to send a request to the Apache web server application, you need a client, which is called as a web client, right? The web browsers that you guys are using to access a website, the browser is called as a web client. you need to use this browser to send a request to the Apache HTTP web server to get a website. When you are using the browser to send a request, there is a specific format that you need to follow. The format is specify the protocol that you need to, right? HTTP colon slash slash is the standard syntax that you need to use in your browser, guys, right? HTTP colon slash slash is mean that I am sending a request using HTTP protocol, HTTP type of service. What is HTTP, guys? And as we discussed here, HTTP is the protocol that is going to the port number 80 to get a website and which is a non-secured, right? We need to give the details. And after the colon colon, you need to specify the IP address of your EC2 server where your website was configured, the code was deployed. At end, you need to put a colon and give the port number. To which port number you need to send a request, and then you hit enter. When you hit enter, now your browser is acting as a web client and sending the request to this particular IP, right, to the port number 80 on HTTP protocol model. Then it will wait for a response back. If any response comes back, then that response will be showing you as a website. Good. Here you can see that this site cannot be reached and it is taking long time to get a response. What's happening? My browser, which is called as a web client, is sending the request to this IP and it is not able to get a response. Why so? When the client is sending the request to the server, first the request will go to security group, right? If the security group is accepting the port number 80 for your specific source IP, then only the request can go to the server, correct? So let me validate that. If I go back to my EC2 server under the security tab, look for the security groups that are currently associated to this EC2 server. Look for the inbound rules. Currently you see only the port number 22 is accepted. Hence the reason you are actually sending the request on port number 80, you are not getting a response back. So add a rule. The type is HTTP, which is the port number 80 is the default. I wanted to allow this traffic from anywhere. Save the rule. Once you adjust the inbound rules of a security group, then you come back here and try to access this IP address. Now you see you are able to get a website, guys. Let me go back to my EC2 one more time. Let me take this IP address, right? While you are accessing the website, and yes, definitely you need to send a request to that specific IP address. Sometime back I have told you that HTTP colon slash slash and 80 port number, correct? Yes, that is how it is. But if you are not giving any of them, if you just give only the IP address and hit enter, still it will work. Why? Adding the HTTP colon slash slash, adding the port number 80 or a default behavior of the web clients like a browsers. So whether you give the port number 80 and HTTP, whether you don't give, not a problem. That is a default addition that is adding by the web browsers automatically for you. And yes, now you can see the website is accessible. But as this is a port number 80, you see the warning that this is not as secured. See, the connection to this site is not secured. Is mean that the traffic that is going from your browser to your EC2 server, that is not a encrypted format, and your data will be a plain text format, which is not a recommended one. That is what it is, suggesting you. So there is different ways are there how to make it secure. So we are not going to that level at this time, right? Let it be a default simple website, because the scope is to understand how the websites will be configured on your EC2 instances. But I'm not happy with the simple one line of website here, right? I wanted to really a beautiful kind of a real-time website to be accessible here. How that can be done, right? So usually the responsibility will not be done by one single person, right? Let's say you as an engineer, you take care of installing Apache HTTP web server, you ensure the web server is started running, and ensure the security groups are properly configured, ensure the port number is accessible. Then at least from the infrastructural perspective, from the application perspective, we have prepared everything to make your EC2 server as a web server. I think now from the terminology wise, rather me calling this as a EC2 server, I think better to go and label this as a web server. Agree with me, guys? Now onwards, can I call this as a web server? Because this EC2 server is installed with a Apache web server application. This server is using to host a website and give the web application to the end users. Yes, now onwards I can call this as a web server, right? That means setting up the web server is your responsibility, and how the website should look like, that is a developer's responsibility, where the developer has to write a code. Now we need to put some HTML based code in place, then the website will come. I'll show you that as well. Let's say now I will ask a web developers, hey web developers, so everything is ready from the server perspective. Please give me the code so that I will deploy the code it into this location to make it live. You need to understand a terminology called deployment here. Deployment in the sense, whatever the code that you receive from the developers, that code you need to keep it in the default document root folder. That process is called as a deployment, guys. Because right, you are not writing a code, right? So you are getting a code from your developer who is actually expertising in writing a HTML code. You take the code, you put it into the right location in the server. Copying the code to the right location is called as a deployment. Means that, now can I use this statement? The Apache HTTP web server setup is completed. Now the next step is to do the deployment. Let me do the deployment now. The deployment can be done in multiple ways, but I'm showing you one of the easiest and the basic step at this time to for you guys to understand, right? So the code that is developed by the developer is currently available in my local system. You see, if I go to my local laptop, right, in my local laptop, you can see here HTML hyphen web code, right? So I have a code that is written by the developer that is available in the zip format in my local laptop. This code I wanted to copy, transfer to my EC2 server, and that code I wanted to keep it in the where www HTML location, correct? That is what does it mean by the deployment. Now, how can I get the file that is currently in my local system to my EC2 server, guys? Can I say that is something like a file transfer between one system to another system? Can I treat that as with this statement? Yes, right? I'm transferring a file from my local system to the EC2 server. One server to another server, one system to another system, correct? So transferring a file from one system to another system can be done through the help of the file transfer applications, right? And I'll show you one of the beautiful, most frequently used application that is useful to do a file transfer from the local system to the uh, uh, Linux servers, which is called as a WinSCP, right? You go to the winscp.net website, and this is where you can download the WinSCP software. WinSCP in the sense from Windows to the server copy, a secure copy, right? You go to this WinSCP and you download this WinSCP application, install this WinSCP application, then it will give you the flexibility to transfer the files from your local system to the remote Linux systems, guys. Good. As of now, this WinSCP software is downloaded and installed in my laptop. So let me show you how to use the software. You see, WinSCP software is currently installed in my system. So let me go there. I'm just opening my WinSCP software, guys. This is how the WinSCP software opens. All what you need to do is give the IP address of the EC2 server or a web server to which server you wanted to do the file transfer, that you mention it in the hostname section. The file protocol, you can select S SCP, right? SCP in the sense the secure copy, right? And the SCP is actually sending the traffic to port number 22 only. What is port number 22? SSH service, right? The SSH service that is running in the EC2 server side, that SSH is doing two things for you. One, it will help you on the login process. Second, it will also help you on the file transfer, guys. You see now, I'm planning to do the file transfer from my local machine to the Linux machine. And yes, still the port number 22 will be useful, right? So now you need to log in with your credentials. EC2-user is the username and you need to supply the password, right? As you know that by default your Linux systems, sorry, EC2 instances are accessible through key based authentication. You need to supply the key for a authentication. By now you all know that if you have really enabled the password authentication by going to your SSH configuration file, then you can supply the password, not a problem, right? Whichever the authentication method that the server is supporting, that you can pass on, right? Well, so at this time my server is not going through the password based authentication, hence let me go to the advanced tab. Let me go for the SSH authentication. This is where I need to attach the key that is required for a authentication. This is like same thing, guys. If you are logging in from Putty, you are actually giving the key, right, for authentication. The same key that I'm supplying here, and click on login. Accept the connection. Once the authentication is successful, then you will be seeing the local Windows system at a left side panel, the Linux server in the right side panel, guys. You see the two panels. In the left side you see currently I'm in the F drive. In the F drive currently I'm in the Edwiki folder. The right side you can see currently on the EC2 server side I am in /home/EC2-user, which is the home directory of a EC2-user, right? Good. Now we can just do the file transfer. So in the Windows system you navigate to the folder where the file is currently located. In my case, the HTML code is currently available in the F drive. It is available in the CLF folder. This is the zip file that is currently having the code. Let me do a right click on that. Let me do a upload and click on upload. Now the file is being uploading to the Linux server. To which location, guys? The file is uploaded to the location called /home/EC2-user. With that, the file transfer is successfully done. Then you just close this WinSCP software, right? Go back to your EC2 server, go to /home/EC2-user and look for the files. Now you see that the zip file was successfully transferred from your local system to the Linux system. Can you use the zip file as it is? No, right? Obviously the zip file has to be extracted, right? So if this is the Windows system, you guys can do a right click and extract the files, right? But when it comes to the Linux, as you know, everything is the command line, right? Unzip is the command to extract the zip files. specify the file name and hit enter. The extraction is completed. Let me clear the screen. Now you verify the list one more time. Now you see that the zip file is successfully extracted and you got a folder created. Go inside the folder. Now you see guys, inside this folder, this is where you can see the website related code and the data that was given by a developer to me. And you can see index.html is there. Along with that, we can see few other information as well to make it as a real-time website. Ideally, it has a index.html that is a mandate, and you have few other files as well based on the requirement. You don't need to worry how this code works. Let the developer struggle in preparing the code for you guys. You just worry about take the code and deploy it into the server at a right location. And you can also see that there is a images folder here. Inside the images folder, you can see a lot of images in the JPG GIF format. These are the images that I wanted to show to my users when someone is accessing my website. Everything has to be kept in place, guys, correct? So the developer has took care of all these details in the website code. We don't need to worry about all this. But currently my code is in this location, right? /home/ec2-user. Is this the right location where my code supposed to be? No, right? As per the Apache Webserver default configuration, right? The code should be deployed it into the location called where www.html. Agree with me? So I need to move the code that is currently in this ec2-user home directory to the default document root folder, guys, correct? Let me do that, right? So either you move or copy, not a problem, right? Let me copy the data. I wanted to copy the code from present working directory because currently I'm in the same location where my code is available. From the present working directory, I wanted to copy the whole code. I'm just giving star. Star refers that the all the files, right? I wanted to copy to the where www.html location, right? And it has multiple folders and the subfolders, right? I wanted to copy all the subfolder structure. You need to give the or flag. Or means recursive, means right, all the subdirectory structure has to be copied. When you are doing the copy, do not ask me the permission to copy or not. Do a force copy. So I'm just using R and F flags to do this copy operation and hit enter. Yeah, one question is that it is asking that the index.html file is already there in this location. You want me to overwrite? Yes. Now if you go to where www.html location, right, and you see that the code is currently deployed in this location, guys. Now can I say this? When the end user is trying to access a website, the request will come to the EC2 server on the port number 80. The HTTP service will go to where www.html and it will pick up the index.html file that what is found in the location. That file will be sending as a response back to the user. Based on how this HTML code is written, the website will be formatted. Let me test that, guys, right? I will go to here and let me try to access my website one more time, right? So I'm simply using the same IP address and I'll just do a refresh here. Excellent. Now you are able to see a kind of a real-time website, right? So the website that you see here, this website is currently hosted in your EC2 server. and is currently accessible from there. All the content, the images, the data that you see here, everything is actually kept in your EC2 server in the default document root folder. And when the request is went to the server is responding back with that data, and that data is showing you as a beautiful format. Hope this is explaining you guys how the websites are accessible. Of course, you may be still having a question mark here that as of now the website is accessible using the IP address. How the website will be accessible using the name something like this, right? This is how usually the websites will be accessible, right? We will definitely talk about that uh, method, how to access a website using the name. But for today, yes, let's be happy with the web server that is accessible through the IP address case, right? IP to the name, that translation will happen later with the concept of DNS that we will be discussing in the next lecture anyway. Well, so this is how the websites are deployed, designed, sorry, the website code is developed by the developers and that code is deployed it into the server. The website is accessible as like a real time guys. Good. I think initially when I was talking about the Linux directory, absolute path, relative path, all those things, there was a question that what are the use case with those concepts, correct? Now I'm sure you will be understanding why we would require a absolute relative path file and the permissions concept. Because if I ask you, hey, could you please build and could you please deploy the website code on the server where the Apache web server was configured? We should be knowing all those Linux basics to understand, right, in managing the directories and the files to deploy your code it into the right location and right set up the Apache web server as per the need guys. Agree with me, right? And as part of this deployment process here I have used the WinSCP software, which is the tool to copy the files from one server to a other server. Here I have used it for the Windows machine to the Linux machine, one machine to a other machine. That's what is the intention here, right? Good. Definitely, once the website is hosted on your EC2 server and the website is accessible to the public users on this IP address, right? Then as and when the more people are accessing my website, as and when the more requests are coming to my EC2 server, the EC2 server will become busy. Agree with me, guys? Correct, no? Now this EC2 server, the web server is accessible from internet world, right? From anywhere else in the internet, the people can go to the browsers and can start accessing my website, right? So when the users are getting more and more, the requests are coming to my web server and the web server will become busy. Why the web server will become busy? It has to spend some processor capacity, it has to spend some memory capacity to listen to the port number 80, receive the request and process the request, right? Then give the response back to the request. A lot of things that the server is doing for any request that is receiving by a specific individual user, right? So the point which I'm making, right? The currently the server that I created is the T2.micro, which is having one processor and 1 GB memory only, correct? If the number of users accessing my websites are going more and more, do you think the 1 GB and one processor is enough to process them? No. And we already seen the process management, right? To process a specific instruction, it has to load that as an instance into the real memory. Some space will be consumed. If you don't have a space in the real memory, the request cannot be processed. You'll get a out of memory errors. Lot of issues. This is the time to understand about the performance management of your web server. In the sense, sometimes the clients are complaining that hey, I'm accessing the website is loading very slowly. You refresh the website, the page loading very slowly. You see the images are loading after a few seconds. There's a delay, right? How do we deal with these performance issues is the next concern to make this beautiful. What could be the reason why the website, sorry, why the web application will be go slow, guys? The primary reason, definitely, I would say that the computing resources, which are a processor and the memory, right, having a starvation, correct? That's the primary reason, but there could be a few other reasons as well. Let me show you a few performance management related commands that may be helping you guys to understand how your server is performing. Definitely, when you are trying to deal with the performance management just to see your web server is actually performing well or not, the very first thing that you need to look at is what is the memory that is configured on this system, right? Free-m is the command which will show you the currently configured memory utilizations. And here you can see the mem section, and the value is in terms of the memory MBs. Ideally, if you give free-g, it will try to give you the values in terms of the GBs. But at least in my case, my server is having only 1 GB capacity, right? And again, all the 1 GB cannot be used. Some memory will be used for an internal purpose, so you are literally getting less than 1 GB for your actual usage. That's the reason it is showing 0 over there, right? So free-m says that 964 is the total memory that is configured for this EC2 server. Out of 113 MB is currently being used. 302 MB is currently free, available to load any new processes, and 549 MB of the memory is currently in the buffering or a caching. In the sense, the caching in the sense to speed up the performance of your system, some memory will be allocated for the caching that is using to improve the performance. All what you need to worry about is the free column. How much memory is left available in your server to load a new processes. If you are having more free, obviously your server is good in terms of the memory capacity. That is what you need to look at if you are having any kind of a performance issues, right? So this is the check that you need to do related to the memory, guys. If the memory is good and the free is showing that yes, there is enough amount of memory available on the system to load a new request, then problem could be something else, right? So from the system perspective, you need to look at the performance from the different resources perspective. Ideally, if you are having a performance issue in the sense your server is very slow, the website is loading very slow. If you are having a performance issue, right, then you need to check the CPU utilization. Is it the problem with the CPU? If there is a problem with the CPU, then you need to check the corresponding commands that will help you to work with the CPU related, right? If you are fixing the CPU problem, after that, if the server is working normally, then you good. You keep on watching for your server performance, which is a monitoring tool. In the sense what? Monitoring in the sense you keep on watching for the server whether this is running good or not, right? There will be some third party monitoring tools also coming, right, which will be doing all these things for you, right? Let's say maybe this is not a CPU problem. Then what could be the problem? Is it related to the memory? You run some commands related to the memory. If this is a memory issue, fix the issue and see if it is working normally. If this is not a memory issue, try to see is this related to the IO problem, in the sense input output operation problem. In the sense, let's say your volumes, the disks that are having to your system, let's say your disk is having a bad disk, right? Then definitely Reading the data, writing the data will take a lot of time, right? If your disk is having a trouble. So that's where we need to look after the IO performance. If there is an issue with the IO, you fix it. If not, then we need to look after the networking related things, guys. In the sense, let's say the processor is good, memory is good, IO is good, maybe because of the network problem. In the sense, right, the bandwidth issues when it is transferring the data from one server to another server, right? Because when the client is requesting for the website, the web server has to give the file transfer back to the user, right? If it is having the network issues in terms of the bandwidth issues, then we need to look after those details as well and fix it. If the server is still, I mean to say the application is still slow, there is no problem with the CPU, memory, IO and network, but still the application is loading very slowly. What could be the next level of checks that you need to do? The next level is application checks. What does it mean by application checks? Maybe something problem with your Apache web server itself. CPU, memory, IO, network are all related to the operating system level, correct? The OS level or infra level. If all these are good, there is a problem with your Apache web server setup itself, or there is a problem with your website code itself. The code that the developer has written having some concerns, maybe that is the reason why the website is loading very slowly, possible, right? So you can do all these four checks and then you escalate this to the application level checks. That's where the developer has to look after their code as well to see why the website is performing badly. If they can improve something from their code perspective, they can do that from the code level as well, guys, sometimes, right? This is the typical flow that you need to follow when you see there is a performance issue of your website. Out of them, I have shown you the free command how to check your memory utilization, right? And I will show you one more command called top. TOP, top is the command, right, which will be showing you a complete in and out report of your EC2 server. This is how you are getting the report of a top command. This command is giving a lot of information, right? I think this is a single command that will help you on everything that you need related to your system performance, right? How to understand the top command output. You closely look at the top command, guys, and observe what kind of information that it is giving to you. Top command says your system is up and running since when. Of course we can get this information from your uptime command also, but we can see here as well since when the system is up and running. Ideally, if your system is up and running since last 100 days as an example, possibly the server may become slow because it's running since last many days, and there are high chances that the system is performing badly. It's better to restart your system at least once a while. That's one thing that you need to check how long, since how long the system is up and running. The second thing, you need to look after the percentage of the CPU that is consumed. The percentage of the processor consumption is divided it into how much percentage is being used by the processes that are running by a user, how much percentage of the processor is consumed because of the internal system related processes. Remember, I've told you that some processes will be started by the system automatically to make your system up and running, right? Those are the internal system related. The commands that you run, those are the user specific. It is clearly tell you how much is using by the user, how much is using by the system. And here you can see ID field. This will be telling about how much CPU percentage is in the ideal. What is that you need to look after all these guys? Look for the ideal. If it is 100% ideal, is mean that 0% use, correct? If your ideal is 0, is mean that 100% use. That's how we can calculate how much percentage my CPU is in use. What is the bad sign, guys? If your CPU utilization is more than 90%, Is that the good sign or a bad sign? That's a bad sign, right? Because almost 90% of the processor is become busy in processing the request, right? Only 10% is left, and possibly your server may go slow because processor has to be spent in executing any instructions. We can see the memory information as well. Anyway, we know the free command to see the memory utilization. Good. Apart from those, the below you can see the top 20 processes which are actually causing the problem. You see, the last column talk about the process name or a command which is executed in the system. The process ID shown in the first column. This process is executed by which user? You can see the username, and you can see this process is consuming how much percentage of the CPU in the percentage CPU column, how much percentage by the memory. So this will tell you to understand which process is causing more. You see here guys, HTTPD is the web application that you started, right? The Apache HTTP web application is currently consuming almost 0.3 percentage of the CPU, 0.5 percentage of the memory. That's how you exactly get to know which application is consuming how much computing resources and who started them. That way, if your processor is like 90% usage, you go through this chart list and see which application is causing more. At least you will know which application is contributed more in terms of consuming the high processes. Then you identify the owner of the process who executed that command, and you inform to that owner that hey, you have executed this particular command causing more processor capacity consumption. You try to see what can be done the best. Sometimes we can fix the issue, sometimes we can't fix the issue based on the capacity that you have in the current system and that the type of the service that it is currently running, right? But always we need to uh, we should be in a way to identify at least the process name and the who is the owner of the process, which process is consuming this bottleneck, which is causing the system is going very slow. Good. The other thing that you need to look at in the top command is how many number of zombie processes are in the system. Why? As you know, the zombie processes are the processes that are eating some memory and it is not required anymore. If there are more number of zombie processes, yes, definitely the less memory for utilization that may cause the issues. So see that part, and if there are some zombie processes, try to identify them using ps command, kill them. If not, you just try to reboot the system to clear all of those zombie processes from your process table. Well, but at a quick glance, how should I be understanding whether my system is having a performance issue or not? So at the top, you can see a load average. This is the major contribution to tell you exactly whether your system is having a trouble or not. The load average says about what is the load on the EC2 server a 5 minutes back, what was the load 10 minutes back, what was the load 15 minutes back. That is how the details are showing here. What is the good sign, what is the bad sign is something that we need to understand, guys. Showing the load average is 0 is the good sign or a bad sign? Let me take a tool here to understand the load average, right? Let's say the load average value is 0. So should I consider that as a good sign or a bad sign, guys? It's a good sign, right? Because 0 in the sense there is no load on the system. Good sign. Let's say the load average value is 1. Should I consider that as a good sign or a bad sign? Let's say the load average is 10. Should I consider as a good sign or a bad sign? I mean to say Which number will be the good, which number will be a bad? How will you be determining that? Correct. Sometimes the load average may be 0, sometimes maybe 10, sometimes maybe 20. Which number will be the good, which number will be a bad sign? How will you be determining that? That is what we need to understand here. The load average tells about how many number of process threads are currently in the running state. In the process architecture, we have understood that by default, a single processor core can execute only one process thread at a time, correct? If there are more number of process threads are coming in, more commands are executed, all will not be executed at the same time, right? The processor is executing only one process thread at a time. The remaining all in the waiting state, right? That's how it is keep on rotating the time slice to execute all of them, correct? So the load average telling about how many process threads are currently in the running state. So whether the number is good sign or a bad sign is depending on the number of process cores that are there in the system. Let's say in your EC2 server, you have only one processor. Let's say you have only one processor in your system. Now tell me guys, if you have one processor, if the load average is 0 is a good sign or not? It's a good sign. That means my system is having one processor. It has a capability to run one process thread at a time, and there are 0 in a running state. It's a good sign. Let's say the load average is telling that the number is 1. Good sign or bad sign? It's a good sign. My system is capable to run one process thread at a time because it has one process core, and the currently running active processes are one-to-one matching. It's a good sign. That means there are no in waiting states. Let's say the load average value is 10 and my current number of processor cores are 1. Good sign or bad sign? It's a bad sign. How will you determine? So the current active running, I mean to say the correct active processes are 10, but we have only one process core. That means the processor can execute only one thread at a time. The remaining 9 threads are actually in the waiting state. Whatever is in the waiting state, it takes more time to process them and the system will become slow as well. That's how we need to understand by looking after what is the load average number and how many process cores that you have. If your number of process cores are 1, if a load average value is 10, then I'm considering it as a bad sign. But let me give you one more example. If the number of processors are 10 as an example, should I be considering load average value 10 as a bad sign? No, right? So because if the load average value is 10, if you have number of processors are 10, like each processor can execute one thread, 10 threads is equal to, right, the 10 processor cores. There is no issue. One processor is executing one thread at a time, right? So we cannot determine the issue by just looking into the load average, guys. Just to make it summary, always we need to check the number of processor cores that we have and compare how many are in the waiting stage, and then you decide. Good. So that's what is the load average value, how it was there before 5 minutes back, 10 minutes back, 15 minutes back. And as we need to look after the number of process cores as well, to decide the load average is giving you a bad signal or a good signal, you need to know how many processors are currently in the system, right? Cat slash proc slash cpu info is the file that you need to cat, right, to get more details about your number of processors. This command will tell you that processor colon 0, this is the count of a processor, guys. So I have a processor 0, and below whatever you see, all these are the processor characteristics. We can see the processor model, processor speed, which processor is currently deployed for this EC2 server, and you can see a lot of other information about your processor. As of now, this is the T2.micro. I have got only one processor. I can see a processor 0 characteristics. If your server is having one more processor, let's say, the way how you get to see the processor 0 properties here, you can get a one more entry here saying processor 1 and again processor 2. So that's how we can see the all the processor characteristics here, guys. This is the command to get to know how many processors are currently in the system. That's how we need to look after the processor by running the top command, memory by running the free command. We can run the iostat command to see the IO statistics, right? Which will tell you some more details about how much data is reading, how much data is written to the disk. It's very unlikely that you may be having issues with the IO on the network, guys. I'm sure 99 cases, if the system is having a trouble, it could be due to processor and the memory only, right? Not for a IO or a network. But I'm just showing the commands that may be, right, showing you the details. And the net chart is another command which will give you some network statistics in terms of how much network is coming in, network is going out from your system. You get a lot of outputs here. So I'm not going in detail with the netstat and iostat at this time, guys. Not required so, right? We're spending a lot of time on the processor and the memory. Let me go back to this command one more time, right? So the proc/cpu info is holding off the number of processors that are currently in the system, right? The way how it will show processor colon 0, I mean to say, if you have 5 processors in the system, the counting will start from 0, right? It's not start from 1. So processor 0 to processor 4, that is how the counting will be there if you have total 5 processors case. That's where it is started with the 0 number. If you have one more processor, the second processor number will be a 1. The third processor number will be a 2. That is how the counting will start from 0 only. And that processor related characteristics are shown below. What is the processor and how it is actually be deployed. Here, because this is a T2.micro, I have only one processor. If you have one more processor, then you can see entries below as well with the processor count as 1. That's how the processor number is assigned here, start from 0. Good. So I think with this story, right, we have understood the Apache HTTP web server application, how to install, how to set up, how to understand the application behavior, configuration files, default document root folder, default port number, Apache Web Server services, how to handle the ports in the security groups, how to deploy the code it into the default document root folder, and how to access the web application from the browsers. That is explaining how a real-time website will be get deployed, guys. I think today we are in the state to understand the use case of a EC2 server. Got me? You might be having a question that why these EC2 servers that we are creating. Now you know the answer, right? These EC2 servers are configured to run your website, and through this website you do your business, right? Any services that you wanted to, like that, any website that you guys are accessing, definitely deployed it into any of the servers that are configured behind the screen. Because of those servers are running, your websites are accessible here. I'll show you that. Systemctl stop httpd. I just have stopped my httpd services, and do you think your website will run now? You see, I'm accessing my website. The website is down. It's not accessible because it is sending the request on port number 80 to the EC2 server. The port number 80 is not in a listen state because the services are stopped. I'm just proving that the website is coming from my EC2 server only, right? So we need to ensure that the applications are actually started. Then you try to access your website. It should be accessible, guys. Right? That means the port number 80 should be acceptable at your server side. It should be at your security group side as well. Then only the request will go to the server and will be responding back with the code that is deployed over there. To do this practice, I will be giving you the website code that I'm using here, guys. We can just deploy the same website code in your web server and see if you could able to configure, make your website live and accessible using your EC2 public IP address. Hope we are good for today. If any questions, do let me know, guys. Or else we are good for today, and at least we are in the state to understand this web server application today. Tomorrow, in the next lecture, we'll talk about how to access a website using a domain name, rather a IP address, which is like a website name using the DNS concepts. Right? Thank you.